Rhododendron weekend. Who likes our state flower? Me too. So this is always a fun weekend for us. We're able to have, if you saw the tents outside there, so we're able to have the Rhododendron Society down here for a big trust show. So our local chapter, the Pilchuck chapter, some great rhododendron geeks out there. We like, that's a geek in a good way. So go out there and talk shop after class too. They brought some fun flowers in to show. A lot of stuff, frankly, I will never see again, and you probably won't either. So some of those we can still find, but a lot of those are ones that are pretty rare and unique to their own landscapes here locally. So appreciate you coming. Everybody got the handout. It's a long one this week because we're doing all three rhododendrons, azaleas, and deciduous azaleas. I've kind of written about all three of those things here the last 3-4 weeks in the paper, so hopefully that gave you a little taste of kind of what we'll talk about today. I'm going to kind of show you a few. We're going to look at a lot of slides. Maybe give you just a couple examples of Rhodies, azaleas, everything we'll talk about, and we'll talk about a little disease, some growing, some fertilizing, kind of everything acid-loving rhododendron today. So we'll start just by kind of talking about some general information on rhododendrons in particular. So this is the perfect spring blooming shrub. I mean, I've had Rhodies in my yard that started in early March, some even go into late February on a typical year. I've got another one I inherited. I'm still trying to figure out what it is that blooms in June into early July. So I mean, we've got a pretty long period. It's not all March, it's not all April. If we look at rhododendron, we can classify the bloom time from early all the way to very late. So you can kind of get the month you like as far as the flower. There's a lot of options with, I think, over 5,000 named hybrids. There's certainly one for every single spot in the yard and certainly every color and bloom time. Now this is a plant that always blooms on old wood. Nothing drives me crazier than seeing people out in the fall or the winter pruning their rhododendrons back. If I cut my rhodie back anytime late summer, fall, winter, early spring, I'm cutting off all my flowers. So once we're done blooming is the perfect time to bloom. We prune after bloom, we grow up in the summer, we reset our flower buds, and then we have bloom again the following spring. So don't prune too late. With rhododendron, I'm pretty OCD sometimes, and I do deadhead some of mine that are manageable still. Who deadheads their Rhodies still? Yeah, I walk out and I got to pinch all the sticky trusses off. So I do that on anything I can reach. I don't get the ladder anymore. So my couple of giant ones are like, you know what? I get the eye level stuff and just do what you're gonna do. So I bring that up because you don't have to. First of all, if I deadhead, it's gonna redirect the energy into the new growth instead of trying to produce a seed. So that's really the only benefit. It's still gonna grow, still gonna bloom the next year. Nothing's gonna change, but it's certainly an option. If you're going to deadhead and prune, that's why prune after bloom is a great time. I can cut down below where my flowers were. I've done two birds with one stone, as they say. Get my deadheading done and my pruning done. Everything comes up, off we bloom. Now we go for another season, okay? Azaleas are very similar. Now I have a lot of different azaleas in my own landscape in Everett, and I go both ways, both these examples. So if I look at pictures online, magazines, articles, whatever, I see just dense low azaleas. Right now you can't even see the leaves on them because there's so many flowers. So those have been sheared, and I do that with some of mine. I don't do it with others. But when I'm done blooming, if I shear down azalea a few inches, even into some bare wood, not down to the ground, not in half, but I can cut them back pretty good. You might stand back and say, what have I done? And then 2 weeks later, all the new leaves come out. You're going to have a denser, fuller, lower plant with maximum flower. So if I'm going for low and I want a little extra bloom, I would always shear back my azaleas a little bit. I have other ones I let go. I want more height. I like the openness, the kind of natural look to them. They still bloom great. There's no difference. But I just want more height. So it depends on whether you're in the yard and certainly your personal taste. But we can do it either way. To prune or not to prune, that is the question. You can cut them back if you like, or just let them go. It's fine doing it either way, okay? Deciduous azaleas will be the same kind of as our rhododendron. If I've got a bare deciduous one, I can certainly walk out in the winter, clean it up, fat branches, dead wood, all that's fine, but I'm not gonna ever shear one of those back because I'm gonna ruin the shape, and again, I'm gonna cut off all my flower buds. So if I have a deciduous one like that, there's one blooming, When it's done blooming, I can go ahead and again cut it back here and there if I like, or maybe even shear it, and I'll have a little bit smaller plant, but I have that whole summer to set the flower buds and get me going for 2025 at that point, okay? Now, we're always going to use a good organic rhododendron fertilizer, right? I like EB Stone's as good as anything on the market. We'll have that on special for all you guys today, 20% off, little pouches or the larger bags. If I'm going to typically feed any of the stuff we're talking about today, I'm trying to walk out usually about 1st of March, or if you haven't done it yet, it's not too late. So once in spring, and then again one more time, usually early June or so. That's going to help me with the summer growth, and again, the flower bud set for the next season, okay? So rhododendrons, rhodie food's a perfect thing. Acid loving, works on blueberries. You could probably put this on 90% of your yard. We keep it away from the vegetable garden. Probably about the only thing it shouldn't go on, but you could use that on really just about anything in the landscape. So it's a great fertilizer to use. I also brought up some Ultra Bloom, and that's something I'm using more and more every year. That's a little bit different fertilizer. It has no nitrogen, so that is not a substitute for rhodie food or another fertilizer. But I found if I want more flower power and more bud set, a summer dose of Ultra Bloom is a huge benefit. So all my rhodies here, about a month from now, I'll walk out and sprinkle that all underneath the base of those, let Mother Nature, I'll water it in, and I've seen a huge difference in the amount of bud count, so flowers for the next year. So this is all phosphorus potassium, which is all about our bloom and bud. So if I add that as a supplement, we're doing both of those then early summer, you're gonna see a lot more flower power. If yours is struggling, bloom just a couple blooms here or there, it's probably lacking some of that in the soil, and we're going to get a little better bloom. I will tell you, it started probably for me 7-8 years ago, and a lot of the modern ones are very heavy feeders. So if you've got ones like I do, like Pomegranate Splash and Seaview Sunset, some of the really fun colors that have come out in the last 15-20 years, that fertilizer is going to make a huge difference in your bloom the next season. So get that Ultra Bloom down. You're going to get a little better buds on all of them, okay? Now you're going to find out there, like most plants that we carry at Sunnyside, we're going to find two different things. We're going to find something that's been grown in a can, propagated, nurtured, and grown in a gallon, a 2-gallon, a 5-gallon, whatever size pot it's in, but it's never been in the ground. So a little bit lighter pot, maybe a little more fibrous root system. Then we'll also have field-grown rhododendron. So if I want something bigger to start with, one of my guys in Oregon or one of our local suppliers here will dig that up as a root ball in the fall, winter, put it in a pot for us, do some bark, a little top dress, and then we'll have a little heavier but a little older plant. So both are easy to grow, but keep that in mind as you're out there shopping or looking at options. We can do can grown and maybe a little bit lighter, sometimes a little younger, but we also have some larger field grown stuff as well. With either one, it doesn't change the fact of how a rhodie grows. So if you know rhododendron, I'm never going to have a monster taproot. This is not going to grow down halfway to China like some things do here in our gardens. We're going to spread and be pretty shallow. So I want to dig a pretty wide hole if I'm concerned about my soil. Maybe again, 1.5, 2 times deeper than the pot, but I'd probably go 2 to 3 times wider with a rhododendron or azalea. Get some good compost in there. Or even better is our acidic amendment you'll see on the ground there, which is just ready-made for you with a little acidity in there. Either one is going to improve my native soil, and then I can always polish it off with a little bit of mulch. So we're going to use the food when we plant. We're going to supplement with a little bit of compost or the acid mix, and then mulch again. But be careful, because especially azalea, not so much rhodie, I think people do the right thing and mulch around here, whether you use bark, whether you use compost. I'm not a bark guy, I use compost, but it doesn't matter which one you choose. It's great for retaining moisture, great to keep the weeds down. There's a lot of good benefits of mulch, but I don't want to bury it up the trunk. So we got to be real careful when we get actually around the crowns of plants, not to keep building up on the trunk, especially with the azalea. We're going to have some loosen plants at some point, and the same with rhodie. So I can have always a nice layer of mulch towards the trunk, but then I can go a little deeper as we go out away from the trunk, and I can have my mulch a little deeper. Does that make sense to everybody? So try to keep an eye on the crowns and not bury them a little bit. The big reason up here is, there's nothing drought tolerant about a rhododendron or azalea. We've always got dry summers. I've got an old yard established. It's not like I have to go water them every morning. It's not that. But if I put a new one in, I'm probably going to check it 2-3 times a week this summer to make sure it has a chance to get going. And if I had old ones, I'm going to probably check them once a week or every other week to make sure we don't get dried out. If I get drought stressed as a Rhodie or azalea, the first thing I'm going to do is abort flower production for next year. So I'll try to save myself for 2025, and I will not produce flower buds. So typically, if Rhodies look a little tired in the summer, some food will help, but also a good heavy watering. And this isn't a blessing on the soil surface. If I water my old Rhodies, which I do a few times a summer, I'll put a soaker hose or run the sprinkler on it for a long period of time, make sure I'm saturated down into the soil. Then I can walk away for a couple weeks. I don't have to do it again. So watch your summer watering if you want to maximize your flower. So just a couple of the products we mentioned here. I brought the bag in. Does everyone know mycorrhiza? That's kind of that magic ingredient that's in all the organic fertilizers. So that's fungus that attaches to our root system, and it really extends us a little quicker for establishing plants. It doesn't help, it's never going to hurt anything, I should say that, but it's not beneficial to all plants. Rhododendron azalea is not one plant that has to have mycorrhiza in the soil. So this is all included in there, and it'll still help your dirt and companion plants that are next door. But whether I use Sure Start when I transplant, if it was me, I'd go straight to the discount and just get the rhododendron food. We use Sure Start for anything moving or transplanting, but the Rhodie food's going to serve the same purpose for you. And then you'll see again the Ultra Bloom and that acid mix. And I want to mention that acid camellia mix. If that was packaged up here, it would have the rhododendron across the front, but it's packaged down in Northern California. So it has camellias and gardenias and azaleas on there. It's the same thing for all those types of plants. That's kind of a new school soil that's a hybrid. So I could use that in a pot as potting soil, or I can use that as an amendment in my ground. So I can mix that 1/3 that, 2/3 native soil, and I'll have happy transplants. Or if I wanted to grow in a container or a Japanese maple or a lot of other things, I can use that as a substitute for a potting soil as well. Okay, so that's one of those new hybrid soils that we carry. Now, a few things particular with rhododendron, foliage size matters, colors matters, and sun versus shade. So I'm going to give you a lot of general rules because in 45 minutes or an hour we can't talk about every single rhododendron we even carry that's out there. But if I look at foliage size, typically the larger the leaf, the more shade. The smaller the leaf is a little more sun tolerant. Is that kind of making sense? So if we look at a lot of dwarf Rhodies, and certainly there's a couple exceptions, but smaller the foliage, I'm going to be a little bit more heat tolerant, a little better for full sun. Look at your bloom times, like I mentioned. I mean, we can have something in bloom all the way from mid-late February into June, depending on what season I want. You can look on the American Rhododendron website. Everything's classified with specific bloom times, and that's in Oregon, so it's pretty close, for us too. Maybe they might be a week earlier than we are sometimes, but that will give you an idea of when these different varieties will bloom. Never prune back more than 1/3 of height or spread. Who's broken that rule? I'll raise my hand because I have with the Rhodie many times. So this is our chance to rejuvenate, I call it. I mean, when I bought my house, some old tired rhododendrons that somebody had chainsawed off, at the feet. So trunks that big that were 4 feet tall. They just chainsawed them off and said, here you go, nice house. So I was able to save a lot of them by cutting them back again and cleaning them out. And I've still got quite a few of the original ones. Other ones, not so nice. They got replaced with new ones in my own yard. So if we go 1/3 of height or 1/3 of spread, we're always going to be safe. If I go down more than that, sometimes we're taking a little bit of a chance. But I think with Rhodie, we have so many latent or dormant buds down on the wood. Insurance policy, it breaks off, it crashed in the wind, the dog broke it, whatever it is, it'll tend to kind of regrow anyway. So usually we can get away with that on Rhodie. Look at dwarf rhododendrons. I think a lot of people think of dwarf rhododendron as an azalea. They look very similar, but the dwarf rhododendron is always going to be much hardier and much more sun tolerant than a typical azalea. Again, there's exceptions because I got plenty of azaleas in full sun. But if I want a no-brainer, sometimes those dwarf rhododendrons will give you the look of the azalea, a smaller plant, tighter foliage, but much more sun tolerant than a typical azalea. I brought a couple things in with variegation, you know, or what we call injumentum. Does everyone know kind of that word, injumentum? So if I look at a plant like this, I have to sing the Bond song. I always call this Mr. Gold Flimmer, if you like old Bond movies, like Goldfinger, right? So there's Mr. Gold Flimmer. And again, it's a nice little rhodie. It's got a little mauvey lilac flower, but I've added in some variegation. You know, and there's a few rhodies around when they're not blooming. If I wanted something a little, oh, wow, that's a little different, I got some leaf color on there. So we could certainly find some variegated ones. And I have others out there, but I brought one in, the teddy bear here. We'll play scratch and sniff here. Sorry, buddy, I'm gonna borrow one of your leaves. So if I pass that to you, you can pass that around the room. Feel the bottom of that leaf. It's like velvet. So injumentum, if you look at that plant right there, again, this is a taller growing yak called teddy bear, but we have a lot of small ones. They're great for shade or park shade. They always kind of have white to pink flowers. There's very few that have anything but those colors. But she's kind of passed the leaf around and it feels like velvet if I touch the bottom of that. When the leaves come out, they've got color and they're totally covered in injumentum. As they mature, the top rubs off, but I've always left with that velvety coating on the bottom. I think they're really cool for foliage, but I think what humans have found out over the years, when I have that injumentum on there, I've got really good bug resistance. So if I'm looking for something that doesn't get lace bug on the bottom, root weevils don't like those nearly as much. Certain bugs that attack our rhododendrons, that's kind of a built-in, a little protective layer there as well. So now you know injumentum. That's a fun word you could take home and spoil your gardening friends with, right? Do you know what injumentum is? But it's really cool. Hopefully everybody touched the leaf because it's very different. I think a lot of people that's like, whoa, what is that? Is something wrong with it? Or this. Does your new growth have powdery mildew on it? You know, it's all silver and white. So no, that's what it's supposed to look like. And typically it's grays, it's cinnamon colors, kind of browns. You can find some different colors, but very cool species rhododendron from Japan. So injumentum's a little bit different. Now, I think there's still places for old classics. You know, we're never, as long as I'm running this place, which will hopefully be for another 15 years till I retire, I'm always going to carry some old ones. I like old classic rhododendrons as much as any. So you'll find some of that here, kind of mixed with, again, some of the new school stuff. Now, some of the Rhodies, yes, someone's going to say, but it buried my garage again, because it's huge. I mean, we see some rhododendrons around that are 20 feet tall, and one of my front yards about 15 by probably 20 feet across, and I love it. It's a tree. You know, clean it up. Instead of doing a shrub all the way to the ground, you know, look at that thing, go, you know what? If I limbed off some lower limbs and cleaned out the crown a little bit, I would have an evergreen small tree that I could do a garden underneath like I did. So, I mean, you can clean those up. It doesn't always have to be down, down, down. A lot of people want an evergreen foliage tree. Well, some of those tall classic rhododendrons will fit that bill for you. Nice and nice big ones. Now, I'm always looking for foliage for flower power with blotch or freckles. We make this easy. So you'll see some flowers as they're blooming. It's like, wow, that's really cool. It's yellow, but I see a red flare in the back with a bunch of freckles in it. Really some interesting blooms, especially on some of the newer ones again. And then look out hardiness zone. That's huge discussion with all the classes. But be careful depending on where you live, which Rhodies you choose. A lot of the really fun ones, the oranges in particular, or close to orange, are going to be right about 10 degrees. So I know I'll speak for me. I hit single digits again for a week last year. And guess what happens with those when we get that cold? We freeze the buds out. We probably don't lose the plant, but we'll have some tip damage and maybe lose our flower buds. So close to the water, fine. Up in the hills here, maybe not, and maybe not those little bit touchier varieties for you, okay? So there's a couple pictures just to remind you. So there's some variegation. The injumentum there you can see on a picture. Or other new growth colors. So this is, the one on the left there is winter foliage. So that's PJM. Does anyone have a PJM rhododendron? I have one of these on my front bank. So that looks a lot different than typical Rhodies, right? Smaller leaf. These grow great in sun, shade. They're absolutely insect resistant again, which is a great attribute for PJMs. But when I get to winter or fall, I'm going to get reds, I'm going to get oranges, I'm going to get yellows. I'll lose a few leaves, The rest of the plant is going to turn a deep purple mahogany color. So in the garden in the wintertime, it's like, whoa, that looks really nice with all the greens and different colors we have around, because we'll get a little bit of foliage color on all those PJM type rhododendrons. On the right there, you'll see new growth. Now, a lot of the ones I chose for my yard have a nice flower I like, but I also like the new foliage, because let's be honest, Rhodies are going to give me like a month, maybe 6 weeks of color in the spring, but what's after that? Is it just another green shrub that I can watch grow in the summer, or does it give me a little bit of foliage interest extension? So that one there is one called Deciduous Azaleas. You can see the big red flower there. When the new leaves come out, deep purple burgundy. So I always have a little bit of color on there besides just green. There's other ones out there you'll see like that as well, that'll give me a little bit of reddish or purplish new foliage to add a little bit of interest after they bloom. Now, we always get some whites. For some reason, white is a flower color. Everybody's interested in white again. I don't know that we had many white rhododendrons around 5-6 years ago, and now we're trying to keep 7, 8, 9, 10 different varieties around for folks to choose from. So still some great classic whites. You know, a couple of these can take some sun, but typically white is one we would want to have morning sun, a little bit of afternoon shade would be the best spot. A couple just to kind of look at there. Snow Lady is an example of one of those really early ones. I want to walk out and see nice white flowers in early mid-March. So that one's past bloom already. It's got sweet little leaves on it. It's not a big grower, but it would give me some nice bright white flowers there towards the tail end of winter, just as we get into the early spring. Rhodies is one of my favorite whites. It's got there's that blotch. It's got a nice interesting blotch in that flower that gives me two colors. You know, that would be a big, wide, bushy grower, and I can grow that almost anywhere. I've seen those in full sun or part sun, either way. Cunningham's white's probably the one I see around most commercially. A lot of commercial landscapes have that as a white. A great bushy one again, that'll take some sun, or shade for that matter, but a heavy blooming one that again doesn't get super tall, but will give me some spread if I was looking for something a little bushier. And then there's an example of a modern one. So Picobello is a great flower. I thought I brought one in. It's not quite open yet. That's a Picobello right there. But that's what we're talking about with flower. You know, I've got a white bloom and I put that dark purple blotch on it. That is really pretty when it's blooming. So you'll see like the buds, like that's all white. Look at the buds, lavender pink. But then when it opens, I'm pure white with that dark blotch in there. So does anyone had old Sapphos? Anyone know old Sappho rhododendron? And there's nothing wrong. That's probably one of the prettiest flowers of all time for rhododendron. But would you agree with your Sappho? It kind of grew with the stretch here, and it was leggy, and it was open, and it's just not the prettiest plant when it's not in flower. So this is, man, getting that flower like we wanted on old Sappho, but into a more manageable sized plant that's a little more attractive. So that would be your modern Sappho there. If we look at some kind of orangey tones, now again, we're going to talk about azaleas towards the end. That's where I'm going to get my absolute pumpkin orange. There's no rhododendron that's going to match the orange of a deciduous azalea. But we can get pretty close. A lot of these look really orange in bud, but then I open and I've got some yellow, I've got some red, I've got some peach, I've got some orange. Really nice colors. There's certainly not wrong with that. But just keep in mind, if you want just total orange, like the color of my truck out there, we want to get it azalea. That's going to give me the absolute orange. So these are a couple I have in my own yard in Everett. That's Seaview Sunset, one of my all-time favorites. That was bred right up on Whidbey Island. That's a local rhododendron as well. Not super tall. Mine's about 20 years old, and it's just about up to my head. Again, with a nice bushy lower habit. It's in bloom right now. Neon is another newer one. I would be concerned with some folks up on the hills about freezing buds on that. So just keep that in mind. That's probably the closest Rhodie I've seen to orange, but we want to make sure we keep that a little bit sheltered in the wintertime. That's one that's not quite as hardy as some of the others. Some great yellows. That's probably, again, between that and the orange are my favorite too. Hotai's been around forever. That's still one we carry, we'll always carry, and that's still, to me, the best canary yellow rhododendron that's ever been made. There's a lot of them that are good, but if I'm looking for a decent sized grower, Again, for that part shade to shade garden location, Hotai is unbeatable, I think, still for the yellow. That's always one you'll find here. Lots of other great yellows you'll see, like Horizon Monarch. I thought I brought one of those. They're not quite open yet. Again, the one in the corner there, if I look at that, you don't think yellow until it's open, right? That looks like it's peach. It's got some pink in it. It's got all kinds of fun colors. But when that opens, I'll be yellow with a little hint of pink again when that's in full bloom. That's another great local one to me. There's a family down the Oregon coast that produced the whole Horizon series, and they're great big leaves, great huge flowers, but really nice growers up here. We've got quite a bit of these down to Arboretum now at Legion Park as well. Nancy Evans is probably our most popular yellow, to be honest. Everybody likes Nancy because she doesn't grow super big, a little bit more manageable in size. And again, if I look at the bud, it looks like it's going to be a little bit of red, some orange, some yellow, but when it's all the way open, it's a really nice deep yellow with a little bit of color on the tip. So that's a little more manageable size. Then Lemon Dream is just a little lighter than Hotai, but plants like Lemon Dream and a couple others out there would give me a little bit shorter, more compact yellow with no other color. Some people just like, I don't want the spots, I don't want two colors, I just want yellow. So that would be something like Lemon Dream as well. Some really fun pinks. So probably the one I get asked more than anything, is I think they're always hungry too, is that Cherry Cheesecake. That's a really pretty flower. I mean, if you look at that flower, it's like, okay, how did they possibly make that? That's got one color, we got edge color, we got a beautiful blotch. That's got nice foliage. That's a really good pink if you're looking for a showstopper flower. That would be kind of the new school pink. Old school pink example would be something like Cosmopolitan. That's still one of my favorites. Nice bushy, not super tall. Takes a little bit more sun maybe than some other pinks do. But that's, again, a really nice contrast with that dark blotch and the lighter flower as well. The all-time big one is Anna Rose Whitney. That's still probably one of our best-selling pinks here. And yes, that's one I have seen buried garages here and there, but it can be pruned. That's a pretty big plant with a big orchid pink flower. So if I'm going to go for something impressive in size and scale, Anna Rose might be a good choice for you. And then again, there's an old school. Then we put a new school there, Melrose Flash. I mean, that almost looks like an Asiatic lily to me. When that blooms, it's like, I don't know, is that really a rhododendron? But I've got lime green in the throat, I've got pink, I've got white. And again, you can see the modern breeding where we have that pickety edge, kind of two colors on the flower. That's one of the prettiest ones in flower out there every single season. A couple of reds. So these are all old school reds here. Anybody have Taurus? That's still the king of the reds right there. So that's a massive red flower, big plant, big leaves, and that one's just about done depending on where you live. Taurus is always one that gives us kind of late March through April. I still see some flowers off and on those around driving, but that's a pretty impressive red if you want a big specimen rhododendron. Jean Marie would be another really common one we see around, and we saw a lot of those around. I always call it Jean Marie, but I think really it's the Honorable Jean Marie de Montague, right? You got to spell the whole thing out. But that's probably one for sun. You know, if I've got a hot baking sun spot, I want a rhododendron. I like the idea of those, but I don't want something else. That's one we could probably put in the hottest spot in the yard. A lot of the reds will take a little more heat, especially something like Jean Marie. A little bit deeper red would be something like Vulcan again, not quite as tall, but maybe a little wider plant with age. That's got a little bit more of like that blood red or deep red color to it. And then again, you saw Elizabeth I brought up. That's one of the big campanula flowers there and starting to bloom. Elizabeth would just be green leaves with that flower, or that's the Oxbows Elizabeth. So again, I add that nice bloom, but now I've got the burgundy new foliage, which is really nice here as we go into the summertime. We have a little bit of leaf color. A few purples. You know, if you're asking me, I think the best purple on the market is from Mr. Hockman. He's a Scandinavian breeder. Polar Nacht. I thought there's one they're just about to open here. Here's one on the back of the table. You know, that's compact, it takes sun, it's easy to grow, it's a really good purple, I think for a typical yard. Blue Peter's an old school one, and again, that gives, look at the contrast there. That's a lavender kind of blue color with that dark blotch in it. That's a really pretty one on the purple tones. And then we have another old school one. So purple Splender, and you see how dark that is? So that's deep dark purple, excuse me, with the black blotch. You know, that's kind of like we were talking about Sappho a few minutes ago. There's nothing wrong with purple Splender. We're trying to carry as many as we can again, because it is probably the darkest flower, but it tends to be a little bit more leggy and open. So either we prune it a little bit to keep it controlled, or we live with that and enjoy the flower, because that's a leggier variety. That's why some of these new ones again come pretty close to that darker purple flower, but I've got maybe a little bushier, manageable sized plant. This Blue Baron is one from my yard here. It bloomed last month, but that's about as close to blue as I've seen. There's a few Rhodies that have the magic word blue in them, and there's nothing really blue, but they come pretty close on the purple blue tones. Light blues, medium blues. I think Blue Baron's it's the most popular one around here when they flower. They sell out of here as soon as they bloom every year. But that would be a smaller leaf, smaller plant, kind of like an azalea again, looking like they're in full bloom at maybe 4 feet tall, but it's got that dark blue purple flowers. Really nice color. Now for Rhodies, I'm going to mention 2 particular insect problems and 2 particular diseases. And before I kind of do this, I want to remind everybody, it's really hard for you to talk to me about what's wrong with your plant, and I can guess what's wrong with it. Unless you bring me a sample, bring me a picture, email a picture, we can help you out. I mean, we want to get you the right thing to take care of the problem. I find with rhododendron, more so than maybe any plant here, a lot of times it's something cultural and not bug or disease. It might be lack of fertilizers, drainage, something's wrong in the ground. We can help you get all that corrected, but that's why I don't like playing 20 questions sometimes. I can probably guess, and a lot of times we're probably right, but it's always nice to have a little sample. You can bag it in a little hazmat bag, right? Bring it in here and say, what's wrong with my Rhodie, and we'll try to get you fixed. The 2 most common things I see every day, everywhere, are those 2 right there. Root weevil is always going to be very self-explanatory. It's not just Rhodie, it could be laurel, it could be a lot of plants. If I have a green leaf out and it looks like somebody came out and took a bite out of the edge of my foliage, it's always root weevil. There is no other creature that will do that. They live in the soil, they crawl up in the middle of the night, they eat, they go back in the soil during the day. So this is not something you can go out and go, yes, I got you, unless you want to get the headlamp on. They're kind of fun to watch. I'd go out in the night and caught a couple. But it's a cool insect, but they do some serious damage. So what are my options? Now, I'm going to tell you all of them, and you can make your own choice, but I go to something systemic. Does everyone kind of know that word, systemic? I apply systemic on a plant. What happens? It gets soaked into everywhere. It goes to the leaf, the tissue, the stem, the flower. So what happens when Mr. Bee comes and visits my flower when I use systemic? Probably kill the bee. So I would hope you don't choose to do that, or be very careful when you use things like that. Maybe apply it after flowering, that maybe we're okay for the next season kind of thing. But there's plenty of good, safe things that we can cure these creatures with without going the murder, death, kill route. So root weevil, the easiest thing ever is bifenthrin. This is not organic, it's not systemic, this is not going to hurt bees, but this is a granular. I can simply open up my can, walk out there and shake that on the soil. I want to do it when it rains. I don't want it to sit in the ground. I want it in the dirt to kill the larva. So if I use that, to me, is the way to go for a lot of people. If you don't want to worry about spraying, we want to use something safe for the bees. If I apply that around the base of my Rhodie, water it in, that's going to limit my larva, which means I win and I don't get the adults climbing up to feed at night. Is that making sense to everybody? Yes?
How is that for animals like dogs?
So again, this is something I want in the soil. I'm not going to let my dog or my kid or my cat or a bird or anything follow me around the yard and eat this stuff. They shouldn't anyway. But I'm going to apply that, and immediately I'm going to go on a day like today when it's raining. That's what I want, the opposite of spraying. I want that in the soil. Or I'm going to sprinkle it out, grab my hose, and water it into the ground. Once it's down the ground, we got no problem. Okay? So bifenthrin, The other option is, if you really want to have some fun, and I've done this many times, if I have an old Rhodie with big trunks, right? Everyone kind of knows what a Rhodie looks like. And I'm like, root weevils, you're going down. I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to do that. How can I do something totally organic? It would be protecting the trunk. So you would get like double-sided tape or wrap. You would actually make like little ace bandages around all your trunks. You would smear biodegradable glue or stick or tanglefoot on there. And then they try to crawl up at night, they get stuck, and then you can actually catch them. They're kind of a cool bug. But you can do either one of those three, and you'll have luck. But if you're going to do the tape thing, this is something we have to check on and replace and do on some sort of regular basis. We just don't do it once and walk away kind of thing. So I've done all three. They're all effective. I would hope we avoid the systemic part of this discussion, and we either go with something like 8 and sprinkle that in the ground, or we use the tape and try to have some science fun with that. All right. The other half of that is lace bugs, and those are brutal. I'll be honest with you. I was out golfing yesterday, and I think every single rhododendron at the club in Everett has root weevil on it, or it has lace bug on it. And I left a little note for the gardener, like, you might want to get out here and spray here one of these days, because you're probably not going to have many Rhodies left. If you look in your yard, that's the best picture I could find, because that's a great example of something to me. If you looked at that leaf, you would probably think, need some food, it's off color, it looks weird, give me some food, which will always help. But the problem is, I flip that leaf over, I've got root weevil or the lace bugs all over the bottom of that, and they will continue to eat that plant day after day, week after week, and they have taken out some big stuff around our area. This has probably been 5 years in a row now where everybody has lace bug. This is the most common leaf that comes into me this month every single year here, going back 5 years. So lace bug is something we want to treat right away. Don't walk away from it. The big key to the lace bug or to these next 2 diseases is breaking the cycle. What damage is done is done. I'm not ever going to turn that leaf back to perfection again. It's done. So it's going to fall this summer. What we want to do is protect the replacement growth. So when I'm done blooming, my new foliage comes out, I want to make sure I don't continue down the same path again. Is that making sense to everybody? So we want to make sure we apply something here pretty quick. If I have either one of those, if I have the lace bug or mildew or fungal leaf spot, the same types of issues with disease, I might spray what is there now. Not ever in bloom. If it's flowering, wait till it's done. But if I can spray, I'll do the whole thing right now, let it flower. If I'm going to prune, I'll prune, and then I'll spray what's left. Does that make sense? The new growth comes out after bloom. I'm going to make sure I absolutely get a treatment on that as well to make sure I don't get it on the next set of leaves, okay? So we can use a lot of different things for lace bug. I've used neem oil quite a bit to protect my own ones. Yeah, I brought some of that up here. You can see a bottle. 8, different than this. This is a granular 8, non-systemic. This is a chemical insecticide, but again, non-systemic. This is very effective on a lot of bugs, including lace bug. So those are 2 I can use, and on the vegetables even too. The other one is Captain Jack's, spinosad. So this is what I tend to go with in my yard a lot of times. With caterpillars, with larvae, with creepy crawly things, because I can get that on there. It's totally natural, organic, and just kill those bugs and not hurt anything else. I can use the safest thing in the world, and if I spray the bee or spray my flower, I'm going to nuke him, okay? So this is not just about maybe choosing the right thing to use that's safe, but it's the timing. Get up early in the morning, do it late at night when the bees are not active. There's no residual or anything that's going to hurt them at that point, but I just can't physically spray it on them, okay? Is that making sense to everybody? So try one of those 3. You could do either way. I think if we looked online, you'd probably hear 3 different people talking about those 3 different products. Neem oil is very effective on pretty much anything, but I got to make sure I cover top and I cover bottom. If I don't get in there and spray neem oil and choke out whatever my problem is, you haven't done the good. If I walk along and bless it real quick, you're not getting the bottom. I'll have to do it again. Okay, the other ones I could probably get a little bit, same. I'd still try to cover top and bottom, but I probably have a little extra boost in there. So try to do it now if you have it. protect your growth, and I would do it again 2 weeks after that and make sure. The problem is that fly comes in, she's going to lay more, and then the larva's underneath the leaf, and if you don't see it, it'll look great all year. Then towards the fall, you're like, ah, the darn thing's happening again. You flip it over, there's all my little black dots and all my residue on the bottom, okay? Same with the disease. So rhododendron disease, to me, there's other things that we might have problems with. It's drainage usually if it's not these two. But if I look at those two samples there, if I look at the top of the leaf and I see a brown irregular patch, that's always going to be some sort of fungal leaf spot. If I look at the top of it and it's like, well, it looks a little off color, but I don't see blotches, and I flip it over, I'm going to see that stuff on the bottom, and that's mildew, okay? So it's not necessarily mildew like we think of on our tomato or another plant or a rose, but it's the same idea. I've got to break the cycle. If I walk away from any of that stuff, it's just going to keep dropping leaves as they get infected, and I'm gonna have my 6-foot Rhodie with one little shell of new green leaves on it from after bloom, and then that's going to get infected, and the cycle's never going to end, okay? So try to maybe watch those couple of examples on your foliage, and I think you'll be okay. So we got any questions on Rhodies before we do azaleas? Got a couple, yes.
How long before, with treating the lace bugs, how long before you decide if it's a lost cause?
That's a great question. How long till lost cause? I think you could honestly probably tell before you sprayed it at some point, but
that's kind of my thought right now.
Exactly. But again, you know, to me, it's always worth trying to salvage. I mean, I'm not trying to encourage people to dig up plants and throw them in the compost heap in the sky. And of course, you come out here and buy another one. That's fine too. But besides that, I would always try to save it. So if I had a really bad, and I've had a couple, especially azaleas, really bad. We'll see the same thing on azalea. I would cut the daylights out of it and feed it. So you know what? It's all over everything. I'm gonna cut you in half. I may not even have hardly any plant left at that point. I'm gonna put some food on it, and I'm gonna see what happens, because I think you're gonna be surprised. Plants are pretty resilient creatures, and you might go back a month later like, all right, I see leaves, we're coming back. Then I can go back and protect that, and I'm in business again. Because the problem is, if it's been 3, 4, 5 years, you know what I mean. You look in your plant, and it's just lace bug, lace bug, lace bug. I might have a little bit of good growth on the top, but you're like, well, great, all this is gonna drop, and I'm gonna be left with a shell of my original plant. So that's where the pruning probably would come in. A little bit of food would help too. Yeah. Yes.
Is this a good time to prune azaleas like that?
Again, right after bloom is perfect time. Yeah, I mean, if we flowered, if you don't care about the bloom, have at it. You know, absolutely, it's not gonna hurt. Again, both of those plants I see everywhere. Don't feel like it's you, it's me, it's every single person around here. I see it all over the place. Parking lots, my doctor, the dentist, the golf course, everywhere has it. I mean, I don't know what it is the last 4 or 5 years now. I hardly ever saw any samples of those come into the nursery, and I've been doing this 30 years, and it is nothing but lace bug here for probably 5 straight years now, okay? Got any more? So we'll do some azaleas. So again, I'm gonna split this into two. We talk about evergreen azaleas, obviously, to keep their foliage in the winter. And then we're going to talk a little bit of deciduous azalea. So the evergreen stuff here, you know, is going to give me massive spring bloom. We talked about plants that are covered in flower. You can hardly see the leaves. I can't do yellow, and I'm not going to do orange. Real true orange and real bright yellow is going to be deciduous azalea or rhododendron. We don't have those options when it comes to azaleas. So pinks and lavenders and purples and reds and every shade in between, but those are the two colors I'm not going to find in evergreen azalea. All these are good for shade, for full sun, for part sun. Kind of depends on which ones you're choosing, and we can do single blooms and double blooms and all kinds of fun ones. I brought a couple just to kind of show you. I mean, look at that beautiful thing. So that's a double flower lavender. That one's called Elsie Lee. You know, that's a little bit different azalea you don't see everywhere. I've got the one in the corner here, that purple one. That's one called Double Shop Great. Look at Ben Morrison. Is that pretty or what? You know, that's about as close as we're gonna get to the orange, like that salmony color. That's got a striping on it as well. You'll see whites up here. You know, there's another little double one. That's Chanzenet, little dwarf one. So there's some great options, I think, for azaleas. We probably carry, I should count one of these years. I bet you we get 30, 35 different evergreen azaleas in, which is quite a bit. And certainly there's going to be one to match your own style. So again, we talked about pruning. Clip them after bloom if I want a lower, denser plant. Every stem I cut is going to give me 3 pieces of new growth, and that's triple the flower when it blooms next year. Does that make sense? If I leave one, it'll keep going up and it'll look great in bloom. But if I want to see what I see a lot of times in magazines, or certainly by my driveway in my yard, I want nothing but color, you know, so a little bit of shearing will always help that as well. This is a plant, to me, I don't know that I've ever planted one azalea, so I'm always grabbing 3, doing a triangle, or 3 in a swath, or 5, whatever it is, you know. And again, it's not the end of the world, it's your yard, not mine, but I think you're going to get a pretty impressive flower display if you group and do 3 of them, or 5 in a swath. You're going to go, oh wow, now that's really pretty in bloom. 1 here and 1 there, you'll certainly notice, but I think you're going to get a little more impact. If you were at my yard and we were doing this class, you would see some of my old 20-year-old varieties and go, that is monstrous. Well, yeah, it is, because I put 3 of them in there, let them grow together, and now I got a 4-foot by 7-foot chunk of purple azalea instead of 1 and 1 and 1, if that makes sense, okay? So the one series, so anyone tried Encore azaleas? I'm going to ask you guys a question today. Has anyone done Encore azaleas? Not one. I figured as one person would have been sucked in by Lowe's here one of these days. You know, I've been really hesitant. I try just about everything in my yard. My backyard I treat like a trial ground, and I'll try something that's like, yeah, that's not a winner up here. Goodbye. On to the next thing. I just never thought they were very hardy, but I like the idea of having azalea that blooms now and then blooms again in the fall. How cool is that? Instead of 1 flower, we have flowering twice a year. So I'm looking at them now, and I see some rated to zone 6, which I'm a little more comfortable with. You know, years ago, the Encores was a southeast thing. You know, if we were in Alabama, Mississippi, Georgia, that's great azalea country, just kind of like it is up here in the Pacific Northwest, but they don't get as cold. And so a lot of those Encores were bred off of southern or indica type azaleas, which I was a little less comfortable selling people like, yeah, that'll live through the winter. And every one I saw was kind of tended to be cut back a little bit. The reason I bring it up is because I'm searching out other ones that are like that are a little hardier. So that purple one is one. We carry the double shot series. So purple, you can do watermelon. There's a kind of a salmony colored one. There's a lavender one now. But now we're down to zone 6, which I'm okay with. You know, we're down there to basically 0 to 10 degrees. I'm not worried about losing plants with that. I am worried about the 20, 30 degree thing, which is typically more like the Encore style. So if you like the idea of twice a year bloom, that may be one to consider doing a little double shot. Those will bloom heavy in spring, grow up a little bit, and then bloom again on that new wood in August and September. So that's kind of a fun one as well, okay? Now, I look at winter foliage. For me, you know, variegation again. We have variegated azaleas. I like a lot of the azaleas that turn reds or purples in the winter. A lot of the ones in my yard are not green in the winter. They don't lose their leaves, but I look out and I see dark purple, brick red, different colors on the leaves that sit there all winter, then we go back to green come spring. So some of those are noted on ours out there, but you can always ask, like, hey, I like the idea of, you know, everybody wants a color. I like the idea of having a red azalea, but why don't you give me one that has some cool winter color too? Oh, sweet, well, let's go buy Johanna. That's got a beautiful winter color to it. You know, or Gerard's fuchsia is one I enjoy in my yard. I like the fuchsia purple color, but I'd like to see some foliage color in the winter. Sweet, I'm gonna go buy that one instead. So there's always options with foliage color as well. We get gumpo azaleas. So those are a type of what we call Satsuki azalea. So a little bigger flower, a little later blooming, and those are super compact. If you're looking for azalea that's like a foot tall, you know, and I want white, pink, couple colors, I'm gonna do gumpos. Those are really small, low growers that you can tuck in on a border, and they will never get very big. The same exact thing with kimonos. We have ones like May Snow. Look how beautiful that is with that lime green throat. That's I mean, look at that little plant. It's got 200 flowers on it. So we have ones like May Snow, or this is Shanzanetta, if I like pink. We have a couple other ones out there like that as well. And again, Maraschino is the red one. That's what I was trying to think of. So again, I don't want this. I want like 2 feet. You know, that's the stuff that's just never going to get that tall. So maybe we look at some of those new kimono type azaleas for a little bit smaller look. We've got Satsukis, other ones coming in. I don't have those quite yet because they bloom more like May, June. But if you know Satsuki azaleas, we get quite a few of them in. That's a huge flower with a lot of different colors. So Satsukis are fun because I'm not buying a white or a pink. I'm buying all of it in one plant. I might see a flower on the same plant that is half salmon, half white. The next flower is 1/4 salmon with spots on it. The next one's pure white. The next one's pure salmon. You see what I mean? They're all different. So if you like a really cool flowering plant, sometimes some of those Satsukis will give you a massive flower for azalea, but really different colors that way too, okay? Now, if you look at a couple, these are a few from my yard. So there's my Hino Crimson, right by where I parked my truck. And that would be like, it was last year, but it looks exactly the same today because it's in full bloom. So those are 20 years old, and my plants are literally that tall. And that's the one every single year after bloom, I just lightly shear. I'm not hacking it in half, I'm not butchering it, but I'll shear those back a bit because that's what I want right there, something low and massive that's covered in flower. I can't even see the leaves on it right now when it's blooming. So Hino Crimson is a great red example. Peggy Ann is a little different. You can see that again with that pink edge and white center. That's a really fun flower you don't see a lot of times. We have those out there. There's my Gerard's Fuchsia in the back corner of my yard there. And again, I've let get taller. It's the opposite. I've got those up now about chest level here. And I don't barely prune them, just a little bit here and there if they get a little out of shape. But I'm never shearing those back because I wanted the height. So again, I still get plenty of flower. I can't see the leaves on that either. And that's one I get the purple winter color on as well. So I come home, I got my gold conifer in the back garden there. Perennials die down. Ooh, there's an evergreen with some foliage color that adds a little bit of winter interest kind of thing, okay? There's the LC Lee, a little double lavender. Double shot, there's the watermelon. That's got a double flower, kind of watermelon color. There's another example of the repeat bloomers. There's a variegated one, silver sword. Can you see that leaf on there? So a great blooming azalea, big old rosy red pink flower, but now I have the silver edge leaves to enjoy when it's not in bloom as well. There's a couple of the kimonos. You can see the Shanzanetta, and then the maraschino pretty much checks all the boxes to me. You know, I want low, I want big flower, I want easy, it takes sun, and that's the one of those that again turns beautiful dark burgundy color in the winter time. So for a low one, the maraschino is a sweet variety. There's a couple of the gumpos. You know, again, heavy flower, but much, much smaller in scale. And then now you'll see that Getsu Toko. So you can see that with the Satsuki. That is one plant, and every one of those flowers is a little different. Can you see stripes? You can see blotches. You can see different tones as those bloom. If you like something kind of fun, Satsukis are late blooming, which is awful nice too, but certainly some cool color options as well. Now, just a couple things with azaleas. A lot of times, you know, all azaleas are rhododendrons, right? So they're all in the same family. So we're going to fight some of the same similar issues that we do. One thing unique to azalea is that leaf gall. Anyone ever walked out and saw that funky looking, swollen, kind of grayish ball on the end of their azaleas? Not anyone's ever had leaf gall. I get it on one of mine off and on. Some varieties are a little more prone. If you're growing, anyone have rosebud azalea? Wow, I'm striking out today with the questions. So rosebud is a great double pink, and it's a pretty flower. We carry it here. That's one I'd watch for leaf gall a little bit more. I have one in my yard called coral bells I love. Same thing. That's one I watch a little bit. Maybe 2 or 3 times in 20 years I've walked out after bloom like, oh, yeah, I see a couple in there. I prune them out, throw them in the yard waste. I've never even had to spray. If I get leaf gall bad, we would go to copper fungicide and prune it, spray it, and we'll still be fine. It's not it looks really weird. It's not the plague. We can fix our plant. Doesn't mean it has to go in the garbage, okay? On the right side there's root rot, and that's probably what I see more on azalea than I do on rhodie. If we bury the trunk, we mulch too deep, we don't have adequate drainage, all these plants are going to suffer with drainage issues, but especially azalea. You know, I'm not going to dig a 8-inch tall hole over the top of hard pan clay and expect my azalea to thrive, you know, for a whole generation here in my garden. It's going to rot out in the winter when it's wet. So we got to make sure we've got drainage in there, and we got good acidic content in the soil. Root rots, whether it's Rhodie or azalea, you're going to see it on both. The whole plant, sorry buddy, I got to borrow another piece of my teddy bear. If I look out in the spring and my leaves are folded over the top like that, and they're hanging straight down, I got drainage problems. That's a sign that I got Phytophthora or root rot, and I may lose that plant. I don't have a fix for that. That's something we do not have a spray. We need to get that plant moved somewhere more suitable, and it might recover. But that's a lot of times a Rhodie azalea killer if I've got bad drainage. But you're always going to see that fold down the middle and kind of hang. All the leaves will look like, wow, it looks like it's dry, and you know it's the middle of March and it's no chance it's dry. We probably got root rot going from a little bit bad drainage, okay? There's a great picture of lace bug. You saw the Rhodie damage with all that discoloration on the Rhodie side of this. If I flip that Rhodie leaf over, that's what I'm looking at, a sticky mess. So I might not even see it on the top, but I flip that leaf over, I'm gonna go, oh yeah, that's exactly what he's talking about. I got those all over the bottom of my leaves. So again, I gotta go the same sprays and get that taken care of. I think your chances of having a rhododendron recover from from lace bug are exponentially better than from azalea. Azaleas are much smaller scale. If I didn't notice that it was in my azalea for 2-3 years, that plant might not ever get back to the way you want it to. This is what I see driving around a lot in yards, like, oh man, I should leave a note on the door. You should probably go get those lace bugs off of there, because in about another year you're going to come down and buy a new azalea down at the nursery. So lace bugs, same cures. The other thing I see a lot of times, just common white flies. We get white flies on pretty much everything, but right now, as all the new leaves are coming out after bloom, that's white fly time. They're going to want to get in there and suck all that fresh sugar out of your foliage. That's easy to tell, because if I walk by my plant and I just lightly touch it, you're going to see the little flies hop off the foliage. Oh, let me get those sprayed. Very easy to take care of, but if I let them sit there week after week, month after month, my plant won't look quite as nice as it did before. We want to try to get those off the new growth as soon as we can, okay? Now, last one, we'll go quick. I'm almost an hour, sorry. So Deciduous Azaleas is the last one here. I just wrote about this in the paper last week because I wish more people did Deciduous Azaleas. The one thing I hear is mildew. Everybody thinks every Deciduous Azalea is going to get mildew up here, and that's not the case if we get it done the right way. So if I do deciduous, I do what? I add fall color, another season of interest. I've got nice spring bloom on all this stuff, but now that's the one thing we're talking about today that I'm going to add some nice fall color to. You know, when I get to fall, I get to see pretty color shades, drop its leaves. We'll see you again next year, kind of thing. These got bright flowers and a lot of times some fragrance as well. But if I want absolute orange or I want absolute yellow, this is the way to go. You know, I'm going to go gravitate towards deciduous ones. Like I said, many of them are fragrant. We try to get as many as we can that have great smell. If you walked up here, oh, that smells delicious, and stuck your nose in Irene Coster here, or a couple other ones we have out there, like Fragrance Star, you're going to smell beautiful fragrance as those are blooming every year. So that's another added benefit of deciduous azalea. You'll see a lot of different species, like that one. Now that's pretty close to orange, but this is a salmon one called Azalea mollis. That's a little different species than some. We've had a lot of people ask for that particular one because they like the salmon color. But if I look at the tag there, can everybody see that? You know, this is deciduous azalea grown from seed. So I could see this bloom in any one of those colors, my specific plant. So I would always go down and buy these when they're blooming, because you're going to get exactly the shade you want. Does that make sense? If I bought a bunch of true seed-grown Azalea mollis or Azalea exbury or a seed strain in, every one of those is going to have a different flower. You know, it may be labeled white, but it's a different white than that one. That one's yellow, it's a different yellow than that one. So you can kind of get exactly what you want with some of those species. And then we have named cultivars. So like I've mentioned, Irene Coster smells great here. That's one we have out in front in the garden, and it's a beautiful plant and flower, But that's our native azalea. So if we go to Western or Occidental azalea or rhododendron, that's our native species for Pacific, where we would see up and down the Pacific coast, British Columbia to Northern California. Excuse me, we would see all kinds of colors of these growing out in the wild when we were hiking. But so man grabs one, a particular color, a particular smell, and then we get a named variety or cultivar like Irene Coster, okay? So these are a little bigger plants sometimes, you know, a good background shrub. You know, we might put an evergreen azalea like I do right along the border, or maybe one step back with perennials in front of it. The deciduous azalea, we're gonna go to the back of the garden because I want something that's gonna be about as big as me. I wanna see all the flowers. I don't care about seeing the base of it. Does that make sense? If you have deciduous azaleas, you know they grow up woody, get some nice leaves, but all my bloom is up at the top, at the tips. So use that in the background, enjoy all the flowers, use it for structure, then we can put some other things in front of it kind of thing, okay? The big thing with me, like I mentioned, mildew. The more sun, the better. People, I think, put deciduous azaleas in too much shade. They suffer with air circulation, they get wet, they get overhead watering, they get sprinklered. Yes, you're gonna get mildew if all those things happen. If I have it in sun, it's not crowded, it's not stuff growing over the top of it. I have one in my front yard in full sun. I've never had one speck of mildew in 20 years. If I tucked it in the back of the shade and buried it with other plants, I would have probably gotten rid of it already because it would have mildew every single season. So if you do have one, give it some room. Don't prune it maybe back. Get some other stuff back away from it a little bit. Let it develop into a nice plant. And certainly you can always use a good natural product like neem oil, like the copper fungicide. Something on there is even a preventative. You know, once it leaves out and blooms, spray the foliage. You'll keep it clean that way. Once you let it get, it's kind of like the rose. Once you let it get mildew in early summer, you're probably going to be stuck with it for the summer to some extent. If we keep it from getting in the first place, we'll be good to go, okay? So here's a couple that we tend to like. The Light series comes out of Minnesota, like super hardy. Bailey's has done quite a few of these. Mandarin lights, tangerine lights, electric red lights. We got a double pink lights. There's all kinds of great varieties in that Light series. We're talking like 40 below zero hardiness, so we'd never ever worry about that around here, I hope. But sweet flowers and maybe, again, a little bit more compact type of plant. I love the Arnesons. That's mine, the Arneson's gem in my front yard. I like me some orange. It's got a little yellow in the center. That's a great one that Arneson bred years and years ago out of Oregon. He's long since passed away, but he went for, again, compact shape, no fragrance on those, but minimal mildew. This is one that I chose years ago because I'm like, you know what, I got it in sun, but I just want to make sure I have the least amount of chance to get any mildew year to year. Arneson's the whole Arneson series. There's Ruby, Golden Solitaire. There's a bunch of good varieties out of that family. We have Weston azaleas. So this is a little different. If you look at that, it almost looks like honeysuckle, right? A little different flower. Those smell incredible, just like honeysuckle does when it's blooming. Now, these type of azaleas are also late blooming. So the first couple are in right now, but they don't have any color on them. This is something that's going to bloom in June into early July, which is really nice too. So if you want to skip the spring season and get something for the very end of the spring to early summer, look for the Weston azaleas. You can get orange, I can get yellow, I can get pink, white, all the different colors, but I'll also add some serious fragrance as well. So I think we have 2 in so far, but that's something that will still keep coming in. And then we have our 2 colors right there that everybody wants. There's your orange. You want an orange one, go out there and buy Gibraltar. I got a whole bunch right now, and as soon as they bloom, they're gone in a week because everybody likes orange. So grab one today if you like orange. That's the best orange that's still around. And if I want big old yellow, I want Klondike. Same exact story. I got a bunch out there right now. We get as many as we can of these 2. Once they're gone, they're gone. This is not something I can find in the summer, in the fall, in the winter. There's one big crop comes in here. They bloom, everybody likes them, they sell, and we're done for the year. So those 2 are out there in quantity. You'll see the Irene there. And then again, a couple good local ones. I used to try to carry all the mountains. There's a Mount Hood, there's a Mount Rainier, there's a Mount St. Helens. They have all good Northwest ones. They're really hard to find. A lot of growers quit growing azaleas and Rhodies up here, which is just a bummer. I'm always able to find some Mount St. Helens still, which is honestly that color, like a salmony pink, light fragrance again, which is really nice. And it's got a little golden flare in it too, but that's a great kind of salmony pink one. Now there's the two things. This is the last one here. So these are the two things on azalea. Again, mildew. I think everybody kind of knows what powdery mildew looks like. This would be the same kind of mildew we would see on a rose or a different type of plant in our yard. If I see that look on it, it doesn't mean throw the plant in the garbage. It's not going to kill the plant. I might go dormant a little early in the summer. I'm probably not going to get the best fall color that year. But if I walk out and saw that here in June, I could get some copper fungicide or something safe, spray the foliage, keep it from getting worse, and then make myself a note. Okay, next year, maybe I get some things pruned away a little bit, get better sun on it, or maybe I get out there right when it leaves out and get the protection on so I don't have the mildew every single season, okay? The one on the right there is kind of like our lace bug. I don't know that I saw, you know, I ran whites down Linwood for about 20 years, and this is I'm getting old. This is like my 14th year of running this place. So I don't think I saw this. Anybody ask about softfly until maybe 5-6 years ago again. And now again, and I'll speak for Everett, where I've lived for 20 years, I see it all over the place. So that's a very specific bug to a very specific plant. If I have a deciduous azalea and it blooms, it looks great, and I walk out a month later and I don't have anything left except literally that midrib of the leaf is all that is left, and you're like, what just happened? I mean, it's like 2 days, it's gone. Softfly flies in, lays her larva, they eat the leaves, and they are gone. I mean, you are done. So that's one to watch for. Again, I don't have to use a death chemical. The perfect thing is that Captain Jack's Dead Bug Brew. I put that on there. If I see the first signs of them, you'll kill the larva and I won't have any more damage happen. It typically doesn't kill my plant, but you're going to walk out in July and August and September that year and go, I don't have a plant left, because it just eats everything. And then it tries to leaf back out, and usually the larva will eat that as well. So treating it would be a wise maneuver. And again, a little bit of fertilizer, a little TLC, we'll be back in business, okay? It's not the plague. All right? So you can always email pictures up, like I mentioned. Our email address is right there. We spend a lot of time on our website in the winter. So Nicole and I, our marketing director, will do quite a bit of work on pictures, on information, new Rhodie lists. We always start the year with a very accurate list of all the things I have ordered to come in, and then things sell out. So look at the list. If there's one that we're out of, I can certainly try to still find you one. But the point is, hopefully you'll do a little shopping today or this week while they're just blooming before they're gone for the year. A lot of plants in our business, I got free access to them in the winter, spring. Once we get to summer, all the crops are sold out, and I have to wait until the next year to replenish some selections. So take a look and see if there's one you're looking for. We always keep a wish list here. You're more than welcome to leave your name and number. If you ever find this one, call me. You know, we do our best to look. I mean, I've got access to quite a few rhododendrons and azaleas, so we would do our best to try to find that one you're looking for as well. You know, with, like I mentioned, with 5,000 plus cultivars of hybridized rhododendrons, I bet you we're up towards 500 different azaleas we would have access to around here, and probably another 100 deciduous azalea cultivars. There's a lot of choice, and sometimes we can't find all of them, but we do pretty well, I think, with a nice mix around Sunnyside. Okay, so I don't think I showed you pretty much everything up here. I think I got all. Maybe this one here in the corner we didn't look at. You like that flower?
Yes.
That is stunning.
Yeah.
So that's a new one, again, kind of like we talked about with the Picobello, the white with that purple blotch. That looks like an old Rhodie I used to get years ago on the peninsula called Midnight. But what a breeder has done is taken Midnight and got rid of the things we didn't like about it, and now we got the same flower with a little nicer plant. So that's another Hockman hybrid, compact, not super tall, Heavy blooming, but that's a really cool flower. I don't have anything else that even looks like that around here. Be probably 4 by 4 on that or so. Yeah, now again, Midnight's a great Rhodie. I think we finally found it again this year. I got a few, but now I've just gotten bigger. You know, if I didn't want quite as big, I think most people these days in their yards just want something tidier. They don't want something huge, maybe a couple big ones for the background, but they want a compact Rhodie or azalea. They don't need more big. So we try to find a lot of them. Okay, we love that flower. Let's find an option that's a little bit smaller, more manageable in the yard too. So that's a pretty sweet bloom. That whole group, I think they call them Miyama rhododendrons. They're all good. There's a yellow one called Gold Prince. It's really nice too. We have, again, the Picobello with the blotch in it, and then Mendocina. I should have all 3 of them out there still. Yeah. So we got any questions? We got rhododendron azalea overload? There you go. Yeah.
I have a whole bunch of azaleas in my backyard, and this year I put the Rhodie food, the azalea food, but I'm wondering about compost or mulch. Should I?
Either one is fine. Again, we got to be really careful not to bury in the center of that, so we kind of feather it out a little bit. But that's what I tend to do when I feed everything. If I go through my perennials and do them all in March, food goes down, gets scratched in, covered with some compost or mulch.
So I'm confused about the difference between the mulch or the compost.
Okay, so mulch can be just about anything. Bark, straw, leaf matter, all of it's good. Compost is already all that's been degraded into beautiful black earth, right? Much smaller.
So you could use.
So I can use either one. The problem I try to explain to people, if I'm choosing between compost and mulch, okay, let's just make this easy and say do I do bark or do I do regular good quality bad compost? There's no difference. The bark is going to turn into compost as it rots, okay? The leaves will, the straw will, all of it will. The problem is when I put bark down real heavy, it's taking nitrogen out of my soil to degrade. So if I'm going to use bark, which I don't choose to, I like compost, and there's nothing wrong with either one. I want to make sure that's clear. If you came to me and said, I love bark, I want to cover my whole landscape, keep the weeds down, save some water, I would say more power to you. You should. But what I would do is go get a huge bag of organic lawn food, and I would put it over my entire garden bed and then put the bark over the top. Now I have some built-in fertilizer in there that bark will eat up and not take it from my plants. Does that make sense? I think people that bark and bark and bark, again, there's nothing wrong with it, but I tend to see the next month, a year later, everything is yellowy. It's off color, it's not super vibrant. That's because, again, the wood's taking that out of the soil. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So compost is like, bark and everything that's been turned into beautiful black pure compost. I mean, you have no issue with compost at all. I can use bark, I can use other things. I would certainly suggest doing it, but we just need to watch the fertilizer a little bit more.
On the Rhodie azalea food, should you scratch that in around the azalea or just lay it on top?
Scratch it in or water it in. I mean, again, when I tend to do mine, it's, like when I do this in the spring, that goes down. And again, if I'm the trunk right here, right, and my rhododendron's that wide, I'm not dumping my food right here. I'm going out to the edge of the foliage, and I'm coming in about a foot, and I'm putting like a donut of fertilizer. Does that make sense? That's out where the roots are. Then when I do mine in March, I will take compost handfuls and I will lightly cover that fertilizer. The rain's gonna wash it in the soil. If you did this in the summer, wash it in real quick. You don't have, it's gonna be tough to scratch it in through all those surface roots. So watering it in, excuse me, would be the easiest thing to do.
Okay.
Yeah, water it in. Got any more?
Hey Trevor, when you're shearing back a third and a third, is there are you trying to just basically a shape, or are you trying to get to a particular point in the edge?
Well, with azalea, I wouldn't worry about it. Okay, if we're doing azalea, if we're doing Rhodie, I would a little bit.
Okay,
if you go back, you could always go back and clean up stubs.
Yeah.
But if I'm doing a Rhodie, it's never like chainsaw on the stick. I know people do that sometimes. That's not my thing. But I'm going to be a little more careful to look at. Okay, I can look at any Rhodie out there, even young, and I can follow the wood down. I could probably pick out 20 little latent or dormant buds all the way up and down the stem.
Right.
If I cut to one of those, that's going to be my chance to go where I want. If I cut it all the way off, I'm probably going to get pieces going everywhere. Then I just got to go back, clean it up a little bit.
Yeah, and we've got some real leggy ones.
Yeah.
That we've not pruned.
Yeah.
And we want to have them fill out a bit.
Fill out a bit. See, I think and that's the kind of stuff. Again, you're taking a little tiny bit of a chance if we go way back.
Yeah.
But that's what I did years ago in my yard. It's like, you know what? I don't want this. I want to start it over, and I'm going to cut this back. If it comes back, awesome. I'm in business. If it doesn't, I'm okay sending that away and going and getting a smaller grower to replace it, kind of thing. Yeah.
That's what I was instructed to learn.
Yeah, there you go. All right. Well, thank you for coming.